Hello everyone, this is a live stream commodity supply chain week 3. Today we will do logistics, and before we get started I do have some announcements. I've made a few changes for the rest of the semester. Let's bring up syllabus. Here's a syllabus, and I have office hours with Zoom office hours on Wednesday. I'm changing my office hours. Instead of having one office hour for every course, I'm having like a series of three office hours for all my courses. So I'm having office hours on Zoom on Thursday and Friday at 7 p.m. I'm also having it on Saturday at 10 a.m. So I'm having my this Zoom office hours. I have it 3 times for basically everybody, and but I'm teaching multiple classes, so courses. So if you come to office hours, make sure you identify that you're in a commodity supply chain. So then I'll know the question. I'll have the context of the discussion. Anyway, so I'm changing that so that there's 3 different times for the office hour Zoom. And I posted that in Canvas. If we bring up Canvas and we open the material here, course material, I've changed this link to the Zoom link for everyone. And I do that every time. Here's week 1, week 2. We are in week 3 right here. So right here, this link would go to the Zoom. And then today, I'm just going to go through the homework questions here. But if we bring back up syllabus, another thing I'm going to do, if you remember, I changed this homework assignment. It's not due until September 6th. So the downside of that, since I have homeworks every week, is that there'll be 2 homeworks due. Therefore, this lecture here is today on September 1st, on Tuesday. But what I'm going to be doing is posting videos on how to work some of these problems so that you can do that. But homework 1 and homework 2 has part A, version A and version B. Version A is a quantitative, version B is a qualitative. It's multiple choice and the answers are the same, so you can check your answers. And so the homework is designed for learning, and so I will go through, post some videos. I've already posted some. I'll do some more here before this weekend, so you can review it and see how to work some of these problems. Okay. If we go back to Canvas, we come up here. The lectures that I cover today is going to be my website. Go to the website under Supply Chain Management, and if you come down here under Supply Chain Analytics. It's going to be the same as a commodity. So I guess I could edit this, but essentially, I'll tell you what I'll do. Under Supply Chain Analytics, this logistics lecture is the same as this logistics lecture that I had before, and it's also the same as this logistics. They're all the same. So there's no difference in the logistics. I haven't changed that at all. But what I do change is the homework from time to time in the different courses. Okay, so you can click any of these, the logistics, and notice up here under Supply Chain Analytics, which is similar to commodity supply chain. I should go a little bit more in analytics than in here more in commodities. Here I emphasize the commodities with analytics. Here I emphasize the analytics with the commodities. It's basically the same supply chain material, but a little different emphasis. Notice here I also have LP Transportation Video 4 with an Excel spreadsheet to support that, and an LP Transportation Part 2 Video 5. These 2 videos will be a couple of the questions that will support some of the questions on the homework. Okay, and other videos I will post, not here, I'll post them on Canvas to link to watch for the quantitative part. But the qualitative part we'll do today, and that is this Word file. So we'll download this Word file, and this is really the notes for the lecture today. So let's do it. Enable editing. Let's enlarge it, and let's increase this so we can see what's going on. And there's what's going on. Good. So here's what we're covering today. So let's cover this today. Okay, here we go. Supply chain. This is fall 2019. It's the same for this year, so there's no difference. Okay, these are the. I start with these configurations here, and this is really just an outline and an overview of logistics. I go a little deeper in the homework, and also further in the course, I go even deeper still. Okay, and so this is an introduction. It gives a framework. Here we go. The initial takeaways, I describe each of these, and this is what I'll cover today. And then on the transportation, I just mentioned the transportation and some of the characteristics of the different transportation modes of truck, air, rail, water, pipeline. I don't go into them in too much detail. That's getting down into the detail, into the weeds, if you will. And a lot of the different metrics are for like trucking is very different depending on the industry. Air is the same, rail is the same, water is the same. But there are some characteristics that are important for supply chain design. Okay, so let's get into this. Here's our 5-stage, we start with this simple 5-stage supply chain: flow of information upstream, material downstream, supplier, manufacturer, distributor, retailer, customer. So in this logistics simply means movement of things. Usually logistics initially referred to as movement of material. And in supply chain, they think of transportation, they think of movement of material, movement of products, movement of components. But logistics really just means the movement of things. Like in the military, it's the movement of troops. It's the movement of equipment. It can be the movement in information systems, the movement of information. And today we have in the medical supply chain, the movement of medication. So it's just the movement of things. And in the banking, it's the movement of money. The logistics of how that happens and the policies and procedures around that. Today, since we're looking at supply chain, the logistics will be focusing on movement of material or movement of products. Okay, a material upstream in the commodities, and then eventually material products downstream to the final end, to the consumer. The objectives is balancing high service levels with low cost, and we'll see that as we go through. Some of them focus on cost, some of them focus on service levels, and that depends where your material is designed to be within your supply chain. Okay, we'll look at 4 primary distribution configurations in logistics: direct shipment, warehousing, cross-docking, and transshipment. First, let's talk about the difference between centralized and decentralized facilities. Okay, on the left-hand side here, the direct shipment and cross-docking, usually those are referred to as centralized facilities because the design is upstream in the supplier on both of these. The information is upstream. The distribution begins upstream, and all the decisions are upstream. So that's centralized. Decentralized is over here on the right, warehousing and transshipment, because once you ship them to lower stages, then the decision, the material, the facilities to fulfill orders is made downstream. And so usually upstream has very little to no input in the downstream fulfillment of orders. On the centralized, the upstream has control of it. Downstream and the decentralized, downstream has control of those decisions. So that's the basic difference. First of all, direct shipment, and no, also these 4 schematics is not necessarily exactly what's going to happen. I mean, it's a schematic. In other words, direct shipment is not only one-to-one, usually it's one to many, okay? And so this is just an illustration. And like cross-docking, here we have 2 different downstreams here, and then we have only 3 customers here. That's not true. You have multiple customers, okay? Multiple retail or multiple wholesalers or whatever you're doing. Transshipment, the same thing. Okay, first of all, these are just schematics. Direct shipment, you're going from upstream all the way down to the final destination, and so that's the strict direct shipment. There's some characteristics of that. So that's going to be an upstream centralized facility, information, etc. These other are intermediate, and the true decentralized is warehousing and transshipment. Cross-docking is like a hybrid between centralized and decentralized. The decisions are made upstream, but then the downstream order fulfillment is satisfied here, but the decisions are upstream, but they're implemented here downstream. So it's not strictly decentralized; it's centralized. But the centralized tells them what to do, and downstream this cross-docking will do it. So let's look at some of these. For direct shipment, down here, centralized, the optimization for centralized is global because upstream sees the whole supply chain. When it's decentralized, it's local optimization. You're optimizing just your area. Safety stock, usually the safety stock centralizes lower because for the centralized, let's reduce this a little bit. Here we go. Because here you're risk pooling, your inventory risk pooling from we saw last time, and so it's ultimate pooling because you're pooling all your demand, not just some of it. Decentralized, you usually have a much higher safety stock because you have a safety stock for every demand stream. Decentralized. Facility overhead, usually it's lower up with centralized because you only have one facility that's satisfying all your downstream, and the facility overhead is usually higher down here because you're creating a warehouse or facility or distribution center for every stream. Okay, retailer lead time. Well, the retailer lead time down here is usually longer for the centralized, shorter for the decentralized because the material is closer to the order. Here, the actual delivery mechanism is much further removed from the actual retail order. So the retailer lead time is usually longer here. It takes longer to go all the way upstream and all the way downstream. Here, it's much shorter because it's distributed. Service levels. Usually service levels are lower on centralized only because it takes longer to satisfy the demand. It's much higher downstream because you can satisfy them much faster with a much higher rate. Transportation costs. Okay, upstream, the centralized is usually lower costs because you have a much you're transporting it one transport from one source to one destination, and there's not a multiple stopping point in between. And it's much higher here because each one of those streams will increase the cost because you're multiplying and duplicating the delivery system. Okay, so here's some of the comparisons of centralized versus decentralized. Let's go a little deeper. Here are the 4 distribution configurations again. Let's look at some of the characteristics of the direct shipment, the upper left, with the intermediate shipping, warehousing, transshipment, and cross-docking. So those are considered intermediate shipping. With direct shipping, the products, these are the characteristics. With centralized direct shipping, the products are usually very expensive products, custom products, proprietary products, or critical products. And the reason for all of these is that they want more control and the centralized control over the delivery of these different products because they're expensive, they're customized, they're proprietary or very critical. For example, if with classified military equipment or to NASA or something that's highly sensitive, you're going to have direct shipment, okay, or very expensive or customized. Okay, the conditions, the products with low demand usually, and this is not always true, but usually products with low demand mean, but high demand variability. Now, the low demand means you don't have to satisfy it. There's not a lot of demand for it. The high variability means sometimes you'll have it and sometimes you don't. That way, you're going to control it upstream. And you have much higher control of demand variability upstream than you would do decentralized or downstream. Critical lead times such as perishable items are going to be important, and make-to-order inventory strategy. So there's where the custom products come in for a make-to-order strategy upstream. The advantage, well, the advantage of direct shipment, the main advantage is it eliminates warehousing costs. It eliminates warehouses. It doesn't just eliminate the cost, it eliminates warehouses totally. And so all you have is your upstream, and downstream it's only like 2 stages. And so it eliminates the costs in the middle, but it can certainly increase other costs. Okay. The decentralized intermediate shipping. Well, the products on these others down here quite often are low-cost products, standardized products, staple products, okay, and high product variety, such as commodities. So quite often the commodities are much more on the intermediate shipping strategies. Why? Because a lot more product variety, because within each stream you can have the product variety designed for that particular region, for that particular demand stream, and you can separate it out. But when you have centralized up here, direct shipment and centralized, then you're looking at all of that demand in one place. Here you can distribute that demand and distribute the product variety. Okay, and quite often commodities are this way. Now the difference between commodities and cross-docking and warehousing here is that you have a very consistent demand within each demand stream, okay, and you have a lot of variability. With cross-docking, with the commodities and high product variety, then you know pretty much what that is, and you have long-term, the demand is fairly consistent. And so therefore, here you have a lot of product variety. The products vary. Here, the variety is well known and established within an area, so you can cross-dock downstream. But the warehousing is the most popular for commodities. The transshipment can also be good for commodities in that when you have upstream, the more basic commodities can be transshipped. As you get further downstream, you will designate and have designation of the commodities. As they go into more specialized commodities, you get less transshipment. Okay, the conditions: products with high demand mean low demand variability. Okay, you need it, but it's pretty consistent, and that way you can distribute it downstream because the variability is not that great, but it's a high demand, so it's very consistent, so you can plan for it. Okay, low cost sensitive items such as commodities and make to stock inventory strategies, and that's why it's distributed, or that's why it's downstream. Okay, allows risk pooling. Advantages of intermediate shipping. It's you can have upstream pooling, but when I say risk pooling here, allows risk pooling, downstream inventory risk pooling on each individual regions. You'll have multiple streams, but individual regions. And I talked about risk pooling, inventory risk pooling last time, and had an example in the notes. I'm working on a video to show actually working the problem, so you can see exactly how it works in Excel. Whether you use that or not, hopefully it'll be helpful. I'll probably do that today, this afternoon, after this stream. Okay, and then finally, the faster last mile delivery to increase service levels. Okay, now since you're distributed, it's intermediate shipping, but you're distributed down here and decentralized. The last mile, which is usually truck, we'll get to that later, that last mile it's much faster. That's why Amazon can get there within a couple of hours, because it's not being shipped from Seattle, it's being shipped from across the street or down the road, because they've distributed their inventory. So that last mile service level is very quick. Okay, so that's the idea behind the last mile service level. Now, service level cycle time for direct shipment is much longer. This is longer, but these cycle times of the retail is going to be much shorter. Okay, the shortest will be the warehousing. Transshipment is a little bit longer. CrossDocking is longer, and direct shipment usually is longer. These are longer than the intermediate shipping. So there are some of the characteristics of the centralized and decentralized of direct shipment and the intermediate shipping of the cross warehousing, transshipment, and cross-docking. So when you start applying this to commodities, some of these are pretty consistent across commodities. Some of them vary with a little bit with different commodities, but having all of this in your head, you can pick and choose and match these things up, and if you have to shift and change, you'll know when to change from one type of distribution configuration to another. And there's where you get this broad framework of knowledge, being able to actually see what's happening and know how to change it and improve it. And so, unfortunately, a lot of times in commodities, some of the supply chains upstream, like in metals and in energy, are dictated by historical precedents. We have technology now. We have other demands that need to change some of these policies and procedures in logistics, and sometimes they don't because we've never done it that way. And sometimes we have to because it's legislated and regulations, but also I think the demand is changing, and the constraints like the pandemic is changing, and the actual stress points are very dynamic today and very quick because of technology. And so that's why a later part of this course we get into agile and responsive, that we have to be responsive. And so in order to be responsive and agile, you have to understand the characteristics between the different configurations, and maybe not go totally from warehousing to cross-docking, but somewhere in between that satisfies that particular commodity supply chain. But you have to understand the characteristics to know how to match and combine and coordinate. Okay. And so let's go a little further. So let's look at each one of these separately. Direct shipment. Direct shipment is ships directly from the manufacturer to customer to retailer. And so it ships directly. Okay. The main characteristic, it eliminates warehouses. Okay, and that's a big one to some people. But also, it accommodates critical lead times such as perishable items. In other words, when you have perishable items, you're lowering the risk of being late, increasing the probability of the service level, the probability of having service. You're increasing that because you know you have one point of decision to say, I need to get that in this time, and so you lower the risk of not getting there when you have multiple points that you have to manage. And so you have one source and destination that you're managing, and so it does accommodate critical lead times that have to be there at a certain time. You make sure it's there because you have control of that. Okay, and there have been problems in some supply chains where you have a critical lead time, and so you have multiple stages before it gets there, like perishable items is a good example. You'll have some called a cold chain that has to be refrigerated. And so to lower the cost, you get a last mile. And so they put it on their truck. They say, we'll get it there. Put it on their truck. They wait a day, but that truck is not refrigerated. And then by the time that gets there, all of a sudden, everything is ruined. And the control of that with direct shipment upstream will not let that happen. So now all of the risk goes to one place. And so you have someone who's on top of that, and they don't want it to be late. They want those critical lead times to be honored. It also accommodates critical retailers, like high-price customized items. That way, the logistics can satisfy a retailer or customer with specific needs because you're dealing with one party. Okay, requirements. In order for this to work well, I think the biggest is the communication system, but the communication throughout the supply chain. In other words, from all the way up here down to here. That's why a lot of times you'll have tracking in order to have efficient, effective direct shipment. Even not on direct shipment, but also cross-docking. You need good communication systems upstream and downstream from the supplier, from up at the top, all the way down to the customer or the retailer. So that's required, which also lends itself to some strategies with commodities, and that is you can't go to direct shipment until you have a good communication system. That communication system is critical. If you go to direct systems without those policies in place or capabilities in place, then the direct shipment policy may not work that well. Okay, so, or it'll be jeopardized. Okay, next is warehousing. This is traditional warehousing. This is what people usually see, what people are used to. In the traditional warehousing, the shipments are distributed from stage to stage, like manufacturer to wholesaler to distributor to retailer. For example, inventory stored at a warehouse to satisfy retailer demand. Okay, and so you have warehouses up and down. You'll have your manufacturer to the wholesaler to distributor to retailer, and you'll have your warehouses on all over the place. Okay, and so you're just warehousing all of this material, inventory, upstream and downstream. Very costly. Okay, but what does it do? The characteristics and the value is increased service levels for the last mile. That's the biggest. You have increased service levels for this last mile, usually a truck. I need it. Okay, I have it down the street. Boom, I get it to you. Very expensive, but high service levels. Next is increased warehouse inventory cost. Why? Because you have warehouses everywhere distributed. So the worst case scenario is you have more than you need on every area, on every customer regional site in your demand streams. You have more than you need to make sure that service level is high. So you decrease cost to increase your service level, and so that inventory cost in the warehousing can go up. Okay, increased warehouse facility cost. Since you have more warehouses, you have more cost to manage those facilities. But you also have increased risk pooling at the warehouse level. So the risk pooling downstream can be increased. Okay, but that risk, the inventory risk pooling downstream is not just one, like the direct shipment, you can do risk pooling, but it's one. But downstream, you can do risk pooling in a large number of places, and that just begins to add up. So the amount of cost benefit of inventory risk pooling technically can be greatly increased with warehousing downstream, not because each one is more than the upstream, but because there's so many downstream. We're talking about hundreds or even sometimes thousands of these things downstream. Requirements. The warehouse management system. Actually, I probably should. Warehouse management system. This should be WMS. I think last time, I think in the first lecture, I talked about the warehouse management systems, logistic management systems. Well, the warehouse management system, maybe you've seen videos on this where, you know, Amazon has robots and things, and the picking system and the storing, and they store it and it's all computerized. Well, in order to have efficient warehousing, you need very sophisticated warehouse management systems, WMS, for large inventories. Because as you go further upstream, the warehouse inventories gets larger and larger. So you need to be able to manage that efficiently. Downstream, the actual warehouse management system begins to change downstream for two reasons. One, the inventories get smaller, the product variety gets less, but get more specialized, and the service rate and the lead time needs to be faster. Okay, upstream, you still need fast lead times, but you have larger lot sizes, and that's when Walmart started thinking about cross-docking downstream. Okay, anyway, so that's the requirements: a sophisticated and efficient warehouse management system for large inventories. And you can get on Google, and I had some links to some YouTubes, and I lost the file. Okay, that does happen these days, because I have a lot of moving parts this summer and into the fall because of the pandemic. But hey, I'm kind of enjoying it. It's challenging. Sometimes a challenge is fun. But you can see some of these warehouse. You just Google warehouse management systems and to look some of the videos on these things, or just some of the pictures. They're pretty interesting. Okay, next is CrossDocking. Now, CrossDocking is shipments distributed from manufacturer to warehouses, where warehouses are used as transfer points to distribute to retailers. Specifically, no inventory is stored at the warehouses. That's why this is dashed in here. There's no inventory there. It's just transfer points. So upstream, they come in and they transfer it from the inbound the trucks. They take it off. They distribute to the outbound trucks, and they distribute down to the retailer. Okay. Actually, since we're here, let me open this up. Let me bring this over here. Let me Google this and say CrossDocking. Let me see if I can find something here. Images. There are a lot of really good images and also pictures on CrossDocking. Let's see if I can find one that I like. I like this one. Let's go ahead and do this. Let me copy this. Let me come to here and open, Control V this. There it is. Okay, good. That wasn't too bad. So here's a good picture of CrossDocking. Here's an example of a CrossDocking warehouse. There's no inventory stored here. These are not storage. So here's the inbound over here. So the inbound docks are here. They come. And so these forklifts take these and they separate them out and they distribute them over here. So here's large lot sizes coming in. They distribute them here to smaller lot sizes, and these are the outbound trucks down to the retailer. So this is the inbound from upstream, and they distribute them, and this is the outbound to downstream. Okay, and so here's, I don't know if this is or not, but here's an example of a cross-dock station. And so so this one cross-dock station, this inventory will be gone in 1 day or 2 days, 1 or 2 days or 3 days at the most. So this is gone. They come in, they take it off, they go back, and they distribute it, and these people go down. So there is no storage here. So there's an example of a cross-docking station. Okay. And so some of the, and you can see it's not simple. You can have many of these things. This might be one region. So these downstream is going just one region. So they can be these cross-dock stations in the region. So everything is controlled upstream. So it's centralized facilities and centralized decision making, but then here they distribute it downstream. Okay, and so therefore you have control of the entire supply chain. You can have global optimization, and that's why it's so efficient, and that's why you can lower the cost by maintaining high service levels. Okay, that's that. Characteristics. So hopefully this becomes more apparent. Decreases manufacturer to retailer cycle time relative to warehousing. Obviously, because it comes and it goes. Warehousing, it's stored, and then you wait for, now notice, manufacturer to retailer. Okay, so that cycle time is decreased. The reason for that is because that becomes more efficient. Lean means waste. Lean, we'll talk about lean supply chains. Lean supply chains means eliminating waste or lowering waste. Well, waste is not just cost, waste is time. And so you'll have more inventory because you have slower cycle times from manufacturer to retailer. The faster that is, the lower the waste. You're not wasting time. Anyway, lowers warehouse inventory carrying cost. Yeah, because you're not really carrying anything. And allows high product variety downstream. Why? Because when they're coming in, when it comes in, you're distributing it downstream. So now you can have the same amount of products. It's not going to the same route downstream. Each one is different because you know what the downstream product variety is. The variety changes on the downstream destination sites. And so you can manage that. Okay. So an example of that, I have another example of that here. Where's a good one? Let's see if I can find a, I don't want to find a bad one. Let me see if I find a bad one. let me get one that illustrates what I want to say. That's better. Oh, this is a good one. Let's look at this one. Let's see if I can copy this one and come back to my come back to this. Go to the next page. Oops. There we go. Copy this. There we go. So here's an example of one where you have the suppliers coming in. These are the blues and yellows and greens and purples. They receive it, they sorted it, they shipped it, and notice these blues are distributed. Each one's distributed. Okay, but notice there's there's more blue here than here, and there's more yellow here than here. And why? Because here's where you can specialize and focus on the product variety in that demand stream. So up here, this becomes efficient to where you are low cost and you have all of the blues coming in or all the yellows coming in. But once you sort it and ship it, then you have product variety, because then here's the lowering the cost, here's the product variety and service levels. And so CrossDocking is trying to have low cost upstream and then high service level downstream and also product variety. And so you have a make to stock upstream design, make to order downstream design, but it's a crossdock. So it's not pure make to stock, it's not pure make to order, it's a hybrid, it's a combination, and that's crossdocking. So it's pretty clever, and it was effective. Okay. Requirements. Due to enhanced vertical integration, it requires advanced information systems upstream to downstream, advanced forecasting capabilities. So the forecasting is not just one forecast for a product, it's forecast for all these products that have to be aggregated. That's a whole different problem than just forecasting a product. Okay, it requires advanced transportation management. Now this is not the warehouse management, it's transportation management. Make sure that the transportation is done well, and that's what I'm going to be doing in the homework, to show some of the optimization codes to optimize different transportation challenges, transportation problems. And finally, requires high startup costs. So it's very difficult to do on a large scale with small to mid-sized companies, SMEs, small to medium enterprises. But for the larger companies who have the capital that can have the startups, then they can have see long-term benefits of dropping cost and enhancing service levels. If you can lower cost and enhance service levels, you'll capture markets, and so and that's what we've seen. That's exactly what we've seen. Okay, what's next? Transshipment. Transshipment is a little different. It's very similar to warehousing, but the shipment says that the shipments are distributed traditionally from the manufacturer to wholesaler, distributor, retailer, just like warehousing. But inventory also shared with facilities at the same stage. And this is how, let me bold that. Let me enhance this, increase this. There's where I want to emphasize the definition of transshipment. If you're looking at inventory is shared with facilities at the same stage. Now it could be upstream, it could be downstream, it could be retailer, wholesaler, distributor, it could be up here, whatever. You share, you go lateral. Rather than vertical integration, it's horizontal integration or horizontal coordination. For example, inventory stored at multiple warehouses to satisfy demand from multiple retailers. And that's kind of what this is trying to show. Okay, the characteristics: increased virtual inventory, and that's the main thing. Here's what I mean by virtual inventory. Let's call this warehouse A and call this warehouse B. Okay, let's say a distributor, and this is their warehouse. And so here you have, down here you have X here, down here you have Y, and down here you have Z. Okay, so now X here trades with A, Z trades with B. And so X comes to A and say, you know, I want this widget, I want this product. And A says, okay, but I don't have that product. But B has a lot of those products because they don't have unlimited inventory, but B has a lot of that product. And so A tells X, yes, I can get it for you. They get it from B and they give it to X. So essentially, A satisfied this demand for X without having that inventory. B had the inventory. But then Z asks for another inventory item from B, and B says, I don't have that, but A has it. So B will get that from A and satisfy that demand for Z. So B satisfies that demand without having the inventory, getting it from A. So anytime you can satisfy a demand without having the inventory, you're going to lower your cost. And so transshipment, you have to have a cooperation. It has to be a benefit to both parties, a mutual beneficial relationship to go both ways for transshipment to work well in the long term. So A can have inventory in that area, a lot of that inventory to satisfy not only the X demand but the Z demand because it's handled the same way. B can have a lot of this inventory, enough for Z demand and X demand that's handled the same way. So they handle those inventories and they become expert on those inventories, or they have a lot of inventory for that to satisfy that demand and transshipment. So that's going to be a virtual inventory. So A will have B's inventory, but it's not real inventory, it's virtual inventory because it's A's virtual inventory because you're using that to satisfy demand. Now, as we get into different relationships, we will get in next week in relationships between transshipment. Not only do they share inventory, but, well, etc. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and finish this off. Then I'm getting ahead of myself here. Increase virtual inventory. Increase risk pooling by use of the same stage facility inventories. And so since A can have more inventory here, that will satisfy not only its demand stream from X, but also from Z through B, you're going to have a greater opportunity for risk pooling because you're satisfying multiple channels. Okay. Requirements: due to horizontal integration of inventory between the same stage facilities, it requires communication capabilities and requires special transportation community. Well, this communication capabilities is important because the communication goes between these two and also between A and B, but also between A and X and B and Z. Now, Y in here could go to either place. Well, Y is going to learn that, oh, if I want this item, I go to A because B doesn't have it. If I want this item, I'm going to go to B because A doesn't have it. So A will begin to learn that. And so in one sense, A and B will be in competition for the Y consumers, for the Y customers. Now they have dedicated, A has a dedicated X customer, B has a dedicated Z customer, but they'll be in competition with the Ys. So here's where the communication is important. A and B needs to communicate between one another to make sure they not only share information, share inventory, they share information, share demand, and share risks, and sometimes share profit. So does B give it to A? Well, B, yes, but there's going to be a cost to it. So A will satisfy B's inventory for X, but they will have some costs related to that. Okay, so those costs also have to be coordinated with competitor customers. So it becomes complicated, but it becomes very effective, and that's why the communication capabilities has to be very specialized to make sure that communication is done correctly. Next is requires specialized transportation capabilities. An example here is you go buy some tires. I want this tire, so I go to this store over here close to my house. I want to buy these tires. They go, okay, yeah, we have those tires, but we don't have them in inventory. I can get them from across the metro area. I'll have them there in a couple of hours. Come back and we'll give them to you. Okay, so you go away, come back, and they have the tire that you want. Well, that transportation, that communication transportation has to be available, because the specialized transportation capabilities has to meet that demand, or else you're going to lose the demand. Okay, so there are some requirements in order for this to work with a virtual inventory. The transportation has to be there. Okay, so there are some requirements and challenges for that cooperation between A and B. If it's the same company, fine. If they're different companies, there requires some kind of agreement between the two, and there's where we get into relationships. And those relationships next week are called alliances. You have an alliance. And so there's strong, weak alliances, and we'll talk about those next week. Okay, let's look at some summary. The key takeaways here. I mean, the key characteristics here. For warehousing, the key is you allow inventory risk pooling. The warehousing has the greatest benefit of inventory risk pooling. CrossDocking has the greatest benefit of no warehouse holding cost. So the holding cost or carrying cost in your warehouses in the middle stages is significantly lowered, significantly decreased. The direct shipment has the primary characteristic of no warehousing costs at all. You just eliminate the warehouses, okay, for as far as the logistics are concerned. Now, direct shipment also has advantages with the products and the cross-docking products and the warehousing products, and the warehousing and cross-docking for commodities kind of thing. The transshipment, this has the greatest visibility with virtual inventory, customer virtual inventory, a larger virtual inventory to satisfy your customer demand. So there are some of the major primary characteristics here of these types of distribution. So understanding the benefits of each one, you don't necessarily have to go all the way from one to the other, but you can go part way because you have certain criteria that are challenging you and factors that are leading you in that direction. And that's what this next one is going to be. What would be factors related to change from one configuration to another? I say change, and this change is not complete. It could be transitional, but what would I could say to considering moving from one to the other. In other words, from warehousing to cross-docking. Well, maybe the risk pooling has not been that beneficial, and maybe your warehousing cost is increasing in cost, and so you want to store less and less at the warehouse because the risk pooling has not been that beneficial, because all the demand streams are becoming more correlated, as we saw last week. It's becoming more correlated, so it doesn't really help to risk pool. You can have separate, so maybe cross-docking would be a better way to go. And so you start moving in that direction. So maybe the demand streams, as they become correlated downstream, the different within areas, and that may be another way to design the cross-docking in the different regions. You're going to go into this area because all the demand for these products are fairly much coordinated the same. Okay, the demand streams over here is not correlated, so we're going to go to warehousing because risk pooling is going to help us a lot. Okay, warehousing to direct shipment. Okay, well, we were using maybe specialized products, and so the customer says, we need more security, and so maybe the warehousing, there's too many eyes on these critical items, and also too much information is being released. So we're just moving upstream and totally control them upstream. So you can go through each one of these. Distributed, centralized information. Here's inventory, here's information, security issues. So there's reasons why you'd move from one to the other. And essentially all I'm saying here with this visual is when you go back to the characteristics, you go back to the advantages and disadvantages, and you understand that. And then you say, okay, when we have these challenges, you go back to the basics. Back to the basics and say, here's the fundamental relationships. How can I use these challenges, factors, constraints, pandemics? This part of the supply chain is compromised. Security is here. This is shut down. All of a sudden, this route is eliminated. We have to go someplace else. Well, when do we move from one design to another? And how do we do that? And then later, we'll start implementing we'll show how these are implemented later when we talk about agile supply chains and resilient supply chains. This stuff becomes very, very important. And that's why I talk about the basics now. I think the last thing here is the modes of transportation. Now, I don't really go into this in too much depth because here's you're getting down into the details, into the weeds. The way truck, air, rail, and water is used are really dependent on the product, the supply chain, where if it's overseas, where is it being shipped? You're going to have requirements. So a lot of these are regulations and individual requirements. At least that's my opinion. Okay, but there are some characteristics that you do need to be aware of. First of all, truck. There's distance is short. The truck can't go long distances. It's a small because it only fit on a truck. And if you have more than one destination, it's even smaller yet, okay? And that's why the truck is excellent and perfect for the last mile, okay? You just have to go the last mile. The truck is key for that. Overseas, no, it can't go overseas. And the cost and the speed is pretty much medium. It costs more. It's not as cheap as some of these others, but it's not really expensive. And the speed is medium. Okay, there's others that can be much faster, medium speed, but the last mile is the most efficient. Air, long distances, small lot sizes, and overseas. Okay, and you can get it there very, very quickly. The speed is very fast, but it's costly. So here, you're paying to get it there quickly, and it's overseas and it's small lot sizes. So what type of products are those? Those are critical products. Those are customized products, but small that need to be there on time. But rail is long distances and large lot sizes, but no overseas. So this is the same as air, but it's domestic. But the difference is it's very, very slow and the cost is very low. So rail is very popular for commodities because you have very large lot sizes of commodities upstream. Sometimes you have long distances because it's going to satisfy a whole region area, multiple regions. It's all domestic. And so once it gets continental and domestic, then the rail is key to get it to where it needs to go, because it's very low cost and very slow speed. So therefore, the lead times here is very large. But that's why you have larger lot sizes to get it there, because it's commodities. The timing is not as important because remember, with commodities, cost is the driving force primarily because they're fungible items. Okay, finally is water. Water is long distances, large lot sizes, and you can go overseas. Okay, and overseas, but it's very, very slow and it's very low cost, because on water you can have huge lot sizes. So these are some of the modes of transportation that I will okay, this is the pull back up the syllabus. So this is really just an introduction to logistics. Now this homework assignment down here, I will cover different bits and pieces of it with different videos on how to work some of the quantitative. So the qualitative part is pretty much what I said this last hour, and that's really addressing the qualitative questions in that homework assignment. So hopefully that's going to be hopefully that helps. And and also another announcement is that the office hours have changed. Rather than having one office hours for each class, each course, I'm having 3 office hours for all my courses. Thursday night at 7, Friday night at 7, and Saturday morning at 10 a.m. So Thursday, Friday at 7 p.m., Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Those are my office hours. That recorded question and answer, bring questions, but since I have all my courses, make sure you identify that you're commodity supply chain management. Okay? And so, be watching for videos on the inventory and logistics. So I get some of them today. Some of them are already on the website, but others will be today or tomorrow or this week sometime. Okay, and it'll be just be working problems, just be the quantitative side. So between now and the next time that I see you, hey, I want you to be careful. Stay safe. These are different times. Don't take anything for granted. Stay healthy. Be careful. And err on the side of caution, because learn as much as you can, because there's some really good stuff in this material. That's why I love teaching it. It's very practical even today. Stay healthy so you can learn a lot. And so between now and the time I see you next,